This morning, our talk is by Dr. Liliane Papin, and Liliane is a Franco-American writer and teacher of Chinese medicine, which she describes as ecological medicine, particularly suited to our times. She practices and teaches acupuncture, herbology, Qigong, and dietary therapy. Her title of her talk is For a Spring in Our Steps. Welcome, Liliane.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you here. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And last week I missed being there because I had not realized you had changed time and we're only changing tomorrow. So as part of the protest happening, I talked to President Macron and asked him to warn me next time when that happens. All right, so today is for a spring in our steps. So maybe I'll do a short introduction before I share my screen, and I hope that will work. I've been teaching Chinese medicine now for quite a while, and especially in France, but in the States as well. And the last few years, I have really wanted to hone in on an aspect of the Taoist aspect of Chinese medicine more than its modern aspect. And I'm really fascinated by the richness of the teachings we can find there and how well it goes with, of course, Buddhism and all the practices like yoga also last week. I mean, we're really at a very interesting crossing point. Our time is difficult in many ways, but I think we should also maybe keep in mind to give us hope that we are also at a very unique time of meeting, of gathering of different traditions, and so rich, so in teachings and in way of life. And there's a connection also, like in Chinese medicine, it's interesting to see how, as our technology develops, we are actually able to prove some of the things that ancient medicine was saying. And only now are we able to prove it. So here too, even across millennia, across time, there's a crossing point. I'm thinking a bit, same with all the research or on the brain and showing the different waves of the brain with meditation and so on. There's a very rich meeting point. And if we can, as it's a challenge of our times, if we could, as humanity, manage to ride that wave, we could really, I think that's my passion and what I do and want to teach. I think we can usher in a different time. And the last 3 years, I've done a cycle on the 5 energies, and this year has been more on the emotional aspects of the 5 energies. So I've talked about the 5 energies several times here with you, and I think those of you who are here today know the 5 energies. And here too, there's a deepening that's very interesting because it relates to the body, it relates to organs, it relates to seasons. So like, for example, we say I said in the title, for a spring in our steps, and that's also, of course, the spring season. But spring indeed is a movement. And so the spring and springing is the same movement. And we have organs that are kind of related to the frequency of that energy. So in terms of springing, upward energy, it's the liver and the gallbladder. So what that means is that in the spring, our liver and gallbladder are particularly awakened. And that when Taoism says that liver gallbladder corresponds to spring, corresponds to a color, which is green, corresponds to a function, which is to move, qi, corresponds to the wind, because the wind is movement. And indeed, in the spring, it's particularly awakened. It's not just a pretty image. It's not just a nice, gathering and a little bit superstitious, but pretty. It's very scientific, and it's very meaningful. So that means, I think it gives us a map. It gives us a map to understand our emotions, our body, how they're interrelated, and our organs and the seasons, and what the challenges are for each season, for each organ. And so it's really, when we start decoding that, it's so rich in teachings at all levels. So this year I was, with my students here, I've been especially deepening the emotional aspect, because it's the same frequency. So we say, for example, that in Taoism, that anger is a challenge of the spring. And it's not just anger, it's that upward emotion. As we all know, revolutions often happen in the spring, right? There's this upward energy that happens, and it's an angry energy, or it's a creative energy. It's just a movement. And so that movement is part of our liver gallbladder. So what I feel is very interesting in terms of emotions is that we often want to get rid of our negative emotions, anger being one of them. And when we go to psychotherapy, we never go to say, oh, I feel wonderful. I'd like to understand why I feel so wonderful and what I can do to make it last. We go to a psychotherapist to say, I feel rotten and I want to get rid of it, and I want to understand, and I want to get to a different phase of my life. And what Taoism invites us to do, and I think there too, Tejo could speak to that much better than me, of course, in terms of Zazen and Buddhism, but it's very connected, which is what it invites us to do is not to identify with those emotions. And even when we say, I'm angry, already we jump into something, because there's a movement that comes through us and that has certain physical aspects. So of course, in terms of anger, which is the spring energy, we can feel it's a rising energy. We can feel our face getting hot, our voice getting louder. Or there can be another aspect too, where we just lose, we get very pale, very cold. So it's like the blood aspect of the liver that is not functioning anymore, because there are two aspects to liver, the blood and the qi, the essence and the movement. So we can feel there is that movement that crosses us. And what Taoism says is that just like there are seasons, there are emotions, and we all have them. There's not a human being that doesn't know what anger feels like. If they don't, they might have managed to get hold of it and not be victimized by it anymore. But everybody knows what we're talking about. When we go see movies, we can see something written by Shakespeare. We all know what it talks about. Why? Because the emotions have not changed. Whether it's jealousy, anger, and we all know those emotions, and we might spend a lot of energy hiding them, disliking them, repressing them. But the truth is, we all know them. And so I find it refreshing in Taoism to realize that emotional health is a part of overall health. It is not separate. And one thing that I think Tejo has done with Great Tree is to really put the emphasis on that relationship, mind and body, because there's a tendency in many spiritual endeavors, let's say, or circles, or, to think that the body is not important, that the body is just a vessel. And a vessel is a little bit condescending. It contains the important stuff, but the importance is inside, is not in the outer. It's just the shell. And the truth is, our body, the earth, we are all the same energy, whether that energy is very condensed or very subtle. And Taoism says that it's the same energy in various aspects of condensation. So same thing when we think that we are the most evolved species, for example. But that's all a story we tell ourselves, because let's suppose, for example, if earthworms were to disappear today, there would be no human beings. We are not any more evolved than the earthworms. I mean, it's all, we create stories. And so when we look at it that way, there's something very humbling and also very refreshing to realize that it's interdependence, of course. When we take care of our body, we take care of our mind. When we take care of our mind, we take care of our body. The food we eat has a tremendous influence. We all know that trying to sit for zazen, for example, after drinking a few glasses of wine would not work very well, right? But we might not think the same way if we eat a very heavy, sugary chocolate cake. And yet the way it obscures the mind is no different. So in the tradition, in the Zen tradition, where like there's a Dogen's book about cooking, and the importance of the cook. I think if there was so much importance, and in all traditions of old, on the food, it's not just because it's, yes, it's a cleansing, but because in old days, there was that deep knowledge, and maybe not explained because it was obvious, that body and mind are related. So if we eat gross foods, we cannot hope to have subtle thoughts. It's the same. So, and when, Thich Nhat Hanh was saying that if we eat suffering, animals who suffer in slaughterhouses and the way it's happening today, we cannot hope not to have violent thoughts or not to have nightmares, not to have fear, because all of that is interrelated. And what I enjoy personally so much in studying Taoism, and where I get, where I feed myself and where it gives me a map, is because that knowledge is so deeply embedded in Taoist teachings, that interdependence, that relationship between mind, body, and emotions. So let me see if I can share my screen. You let me know if you can see it. And do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right. See, I did a nice first slide, Tejo, with you and me next to each other.
Nice.
All right, so that's a little bit more of what I was talking about here. So the body-mind connection, meaning that the body is a base for our emotions, for our mental activity, meditation, spiritual activity. So, and of course, last week, I know you practiced that. I thank you for sending me the replay. I did the yoga with Paige, which was really wonderful. So we really need to know and to convince ourselves of that interrelatedness, the processes of blood, air, and hormones through the body and our mind and body. So when we take alcohol, drugs, and when the relationship between drugs and blood, that's what I wanted to say, food and blood, because everything we do affects our blood sugar. And the blood sugar is our lifeline, right? And when we talk spring in our steps and liver, it's particularly important because one function of liver, which is the tree energy in Chinese medicine, tree energy in Taoism, one of its functions is to store the blood, to store the resources. So if our blood is toxic, then the liver is toxic. Then, and on and on. But today we're going to look at the spring season. So I'm going to put emphasis on the liver because it plays the same part as the tree. So one of its functions is, of course, to cleanse the blood. And the blood also goes to our brain. So how well our blood is oxygenated, how toxic or not toxic our blood is going to have a direct effect on our mind and our thoughts. We have all had, I think, the experience of eating too much or drinking too much and having really bad nights with nightmares, right? Meaning the brain is connected. So our thoughts do not happen in a vacuum. We are more like antennas. And we receive certain frequencies, and depending on the subtle of energy of our cells, of our body, what we're going to capture, what we're going to receive is more or less subtle. So if we make our blood toxic, we definitely will have more toxic thoughts and ruminations and things in circle, because blood sugar is again very important. It's our lifeline. We know also that liver stores blood and glycogen. So again, blood sugar plays a huge part. So I'm talking about sugar here more because we are aware of the influence of alcohol on our thoughts, or drugs on our thoughts. We are sometimes less aware of sugar, and yet alcohol is just a form of sugar. It just goes into the blood much more quickly. And I'm thinking of that too, because today among young people, and not only young people, but they are developing fatty livers because of Coke and all the soft drinks that they're drinking. And it's a disease that's developing very quickly and that affects young people. And it's called the soda disease. The concentration of sugar in those drinks that affects the liver. And then, of course, we'll see in terms of what the liver does, it has a very important part in our stability, in our creativity. So those functions are also diseased. So again, the food that we eat, whether it's the food that we put in our plate and in our mouth, the food of what we feed ourselves with in terms of what we watch, what we choose to feed ourselves with, all of that is interconnected within our body and within our minds. One thing that, and I can't remember, I don't think I said it here, but if I did, please forgive me for those who heard that. But not long ago, I was at a conference at a Tibetan Buddhist center, and there was the Lama was able to speak in English, but not in French. So of course I heard the English and I heard the French. And the Lama was talking about the precious body. Sometimes he would say precious existence, but he would say the precious body very often. And the translator in French would translate by precious existence. And so at the end, I asked, I said, why did you choose to translate the word body that was used by the Lama by the translation existence? And the answer I got was, well, we can choose either one because in Tibetan, it's one word. The same word means life, existence, or body. And I loved that. I thought, wow, this is great, because indeed, whether we like it or not, everything we experience, including doing Zazen, including the most subtle activities we want, it's all happening through the body, right? That's the basis of life. So it's interesting indeed that in Tibetan, it's the same word. Because, again, it's part of the mystery, why it is like that, why spirits needs to be embodied to actualize itself. That's mystery. But that's a fact, at least in this dualistic world, that is a rule of life that we experience through the body. So, and sometimes, we talk about mind over matter. And I don't know, I'm not convinced by that, let's say, because it is true that sometimes and often the mind can be stronger than the body. We have all experienced being able to do amazing things that we did not think our body could do. We have heard or read stories about, women being suddenly able to lift a car to save a child. And so sometimes indeed, mind can be stronger than matter. But even in those examples, you're not going to have a very sickly woman being able to lift a car to save a child. The woman needs to have enough vitality to be able to awaken energy. By the same token, people who are able to do amazing things, athletes, or whatever we think of, there's usually behind a very long training of the body. Again, it's not something that happens over time. Same in Taoism or in martial arts. I'm thinking of the Shaolin Temple in China, where the monks can do amazing feats, body feats, but they have followed. And it seems like indeed mind is over matter. They can jump in the air and do amazing things, but it's the same. For years, they have trained very intensively with herbs, with a regimen of specific foods, and it's not happening in a vacuum. By the same token, we've heard of some yogi who are able not to feed themselves for a long time, sometimes years, and who are able to transcend the body. But there again, if you look at their history, they're people, they have not been fed with Coca-Cola and hamburgers. They come from a background that where there's already a knowledge about how to train the body and how to make the body able to transcend itself. Here too, in Taoism, I love the legends because the legends about immortals, because the image about immortals was what has always, how to say, titillated me, is that in those stories, when an immortal reaches the state of immortality, which you could say it's awakening, and where they are able to transcend space and time, and they're, they go up in the air and they disappear. And what is really interesting in those legends of Taoism is that they just leave their slippers behind, meaning they disappear with their bodies. So in those old stories, it's not like the pure mind finally goes away and the body stays behind. It's that energy, mind-body energy, changes itself and becomes its most subtle form, but it's the same energy. And they live with their immortal body. So just what I like about that, or the reason why it speaks to me, is that I think it encourages us or shows us a way of looking differently at body, mind, which we have such a hard time doing in the West. And actually in some Eastern traditions too. So here now we are in the spring. So what are our body-mind challenges here for the season? And last week Paige talked about yoga and showed some movements, and she talked about the equinox time. And so the challenge of equinox is that it's a very unstable time. We are going from winter to spring. So winter to spring means we're coming from yin to yang. So equinox, even though it says equal, is actually a very unstable time because, it's oscillating. Like in the weather, nice weather and back to winter for a while. And it's very uneven. Same in autumn. So those two times of year are times when you have a lot of epidemics, where you see, like COVID in 2020, if you remember, confinement was in the spring, right? So it's a time when we switch from yin to yang in the spring and yang to yin in autumn. So those are the most challenging in terms of finding balance, actually. So it's a transition time. It goes from descent to ascent, in the spring. It's east and west, morning and evening. And so what we have in that time, here you have wood and metal. East is wood, liver, gallbladder. Metal is lung, large intestine. So you see east and west, those two are opposite, and they are moments of balance between fire and water. So so this is just one model of the 5 transformations where the earth, because we are earthlings, we are beings of the earth. So that is the map that we live with. So, and here are the meridians of the liver gallbladder, because there is also a meridian that corresponds to the organ. So here is the liver meridian from the big toe. So if you get acupuncture, I'm sure some of those points are familiar to you. And here is the gallbladder meridian, very interesting meridian that is really in the middle between back and front, that equinox aspect. And see, in the liver, it's also in the middle of the leg. So that's really the tree energy between earth and heaven. And then there's a meridian that is called the daimai, the belt meridian, that shares points with the gallbladder. And here too, that meridian separates lower from higher, below and above. So every time we talk about an organ, there's a meridian that corresponds to it. There's the organ, but it goes much beyond the organ. There's a movement and energy. There's a color. So for liver gallbladder, it's a color green. There's a season, spring for liver gallbladder, a time of day and night. So for liver gallbladder, it's 1 to 3 in the morning, but it's also the morning, the beginning. Spring, it's the new, the beginning. So let's say if we have a project, you can say there's an energy of the project that is the youth of the project. And we do need strong liver energy at that time, in particular for the creativity, the creative part of the project. A business also experiences different times. So it's a rhythm that crosses all aspects of life and our body and times of day. So liver gallbladder is associated with youth. And of course, it's in life, youth, so adolescence and youth are especially, permeated by that energy. They have the same energy as liver gallbladder, a certain immature energy and fantastic energy, creative energy. Thank God there are young people to dream. They have a vivid imagination, and what is does not stop them. You could say that Tejo, when she dreamed or when she envisioned or when she started grade 3, that liver gallbladder energy was very alive. Okay, so it's that capacity to see what not is, or to dream, or to, the quest to go in a direction, even if we don't quite know where it's taking us, but that energy of beginnings. That's liver gallbladder energy. So, of course, we can take care of that energy through movement. And last week, Paige made us do a few exercises like that, where especially this movement here, you see, or this one, you work on the gallbladder meridian. So because gallbladder and liver, if you understand this upward energy, the main pathology of liver gallbladder is stagnation. Liver gallbladder do not thrive in stagnation, whether it's stagnating thoughts, whether it's stagnating environment. They thrive, it's a spring movement, so they thrive on newness, on new directions, on even if it's one little step, but a new step, something fresh. When we say in Zen, beginner's mind, that's liver gallbladder energy. Okay, so meaning also that's not an energy that's necessarily very wise. It can be a bit immature or very immature. And anger, for example, is not a mature emotion, and yet it has its purpose. It's just a movement what we do with it is when we put together those 5 energies and where the wisdom is needed and taking care of the health of our body, because wood that is too dry, for example, will burn. So if we drink too much alcohol, it's a fire. So we do become dry and our liver becomes sick and dry, and we're going to get angry easily, and a very immature anger, very easily irritable, impatient. Same thing, actually, not eating meat. It's not, of course, it is compassion, but it's not just that. It's also because meat, actually the word cholesterol comes from chole, which means gallbladder. And the word cholesterol was created from what was analyzed from gallbladder stones. Okay, so meat makes our gallbladder stagnate. And when we are stagnated, same, either we get angry, impatient, hyperactivity in young people, in children, has a lot to do with sugar also. So again, you cannot separate the food we eat, the way we live, and our aspirations, toward whatever it is we want to create, a more peaceful environment, or a more peaceful zazen, or it's all one, literally. And that's not just an image, it's a reality within our body, within our minds. So movement is very helpful. And of course, as human beings, we do have an affinity with trees. You see, our structure is a tree structure. And when we say tree, it's also the structure you see in a small blade of grass. It's a structure, it's a frequency of a structure that we see everywhere. And of course, it's the spring that gushes forward in spring too, when it's unfrozen. So the movement is upward. So whenever we do something that is a quest toward the light, whether it's a quest, whether it's deciding to do a session, whether it's deciding to do a trip, whenever we go for a quest, that's liver gallbladder energy. And so the healthier our liver is, and the healthier our decisions will be. It's what takes us out of stillness. And I don't mean, of course, the stillness of, how to say, again, that's the spring energy, because even when we are still on our cushion, our blood continues to circulate. And actually, the more still we get, and the better our blood circulates. And we can tell how stagnated we are and how our blood has a hard time flowing when the more we sit and the more we have pains in our articulations. So it's a movement toward light, just like that little blade of grass seeks light. And as human beings, we have the same aspiration. It's a movement of life, to go toward life, to go toward heat, toward the sun. The whole of life seeks light and sunlight. So in Taoist tradition, we say that liver stores blood and essences. That's the old words, but we can translate essences by B12, vitamin A, vitamin D. All of those are the essences. And like I said at the beginning, it's very interesting because the more we discover, for example, vitamin D, that we call the vitamin of light, right? Well, we've discovered that is indeed stored in the liver, right? So the more we learn with our modern science and medicine, and the more it validates that ancient model. It says also that the liver rules sinews and tendons, so important, of course, for meaning that any arthritic pain will benefit from liver care. The color is green. The taste is sour, acidic. That's the taste of young plants, you know, when they're not ripe. And it is purposeful in nature because acidic makes it more resistant. When something is very ripe and sugary, and like a fruit, it's very fragile. It won't, it needs, at that time, either it falls and decomposes. When the sour taste is what we use, for example, to make pickles, right? That fermentation. So it helps to conserve life. However, in excess, that same taste will damage the liver. So we talked about gallbladder and about sugar, and all of those are very acidic tastes. So we suffer in our modern world from over acidic conditions. You can say too much fire in our livers, too much fire, too much speed. We say also that liver opens into the eyes, the photosynthesis, and again, vitamin D is synthesized by our liver. Vitamin A, which is so important for our eyes that we find in carrots and beets, well, it's also stored in the liver. It rules over the smooth flow of qi, meaning movement. If we translate with our modern world, it rules over the circulation of qi. So it's very close to blood again. So if our extremities get cold in the winter, we have a hard time warming up our extremities. That means our liver, the smooth flow of qi of our liver is not quite right. So we can always benefit from a liver cleanse. It's a residence of the Hun that is translated as celestial spirit, meaning without going too far, it's that quest for the light, that movement toward light. And here, the fact that we all want to do Zazen meditation study, that's also that seeking the light. So what is good in terms of liver to help our livers? Of course, the color green. You can conjugate it in any form and shape. Green foods, green juices, vitamin A, vitamin D, carrots, beets, goji. And what cools the liver, because our liver tends to be too acidic and too hot. Anger. So mint is good to cool the liver. It opens into the eyes. So all the foods that are good for the eyes, which are the same: carrots, goji, berries, mint, chrysanthemum, chamomile, are very good also for the liver. Activating the pineal gland. So if we want to activate the pineal gland, meaning, to be more clairvoyant, meaning being more able to see what is not visible to the eyes, more subtle. Again, we can take it as far as we want, or as close as we want, meaning it can only be to be able to be clear in our visions and not muddled, not to have a muddled mind that cannot think, the way we think when we have a sinus infection, for example, where it's so hard to focus on concentrate. So the pineal gland, which is also the gland that activates our sleep, and reacts to light at night, also depends on the health of our liver. So when we say excess acidity, we also mean excess heat, arthritis, frustration, anger. Acidic foods, sugar, alcohol, meat, dairy products. Those are the ones also that do not have fiber. Fiber is wood, and liver, the tree, of course, needs good wood. And we know that our intestines that are so long need fiber. So the same foods here, sugar, alcohol, meat, dairy products, are the ones that do not have fiber. And we also need strong roots. You know, we don't want to be Don Quixote, fighting against mills. You know, we want to have strong roots because that's the blood of the liver. Otherwise, liver energy, anger energy can be out of touch, paranoiac, or delusional, wanting to be on top all the time, to be high all the time in any possible ways or by any possible means. So it needs strong roots, and physically, strong roots mean minerals, very rich, mineral-rich foods. And of course, we're talking again about vegetables, grain, we're talking about nuts, beans. Those are the ones that are rich in minerals. So I'm going to stop the slides here. So, and then in terms of, I'm just going to finish with that I love thinking of archetypes that correspond to that energy. Archetypes that correspond to that liver energy are the vagabond, you know, in Taoism, you know, the wandering Taoist, or the monk that travels begging, or the pilgrim. There's always that, you know, that quest. And the knight is also a liver archetype. In modern words, we could say the militant, the activist, is a modern archetype of liver gallbladder energy. And we need to know with those archetypes or with that energy, there's not a moral good or bad. It can go either way. You know, we can be very angry peace activists. And so if our liver energy is unbalanced, meaning that anger is a very immature energy, and it really needs clairvoyance and discernment to be able to see when we use an energy, how to say, not in its rightful purpose. Caroline Myss gave a good example of that. She says the rescuer energy can be, for example, a double energy. If we want to rescue people at all costs, and when the true liver energy of a rescuer is if people need help, you go rescue them and then you go back to your business. But some people might feed themselves on rescuing others because it makes them feel good, makes them feel loved. So all that liver energy of the quest always needs a very keen clairvoyance, keen observation. And I think Zazen, you know, meditation of all types, are prayers, are ways of looking for that guidance, because that liver energy is also a very immature energy. So just like young people, you know, if we choose soldiers when they're 18 years old, it's because they have energy, but also because they are more easy to manipulate at that time. It's not a very mature energy, and it needs maturity, wisdom, and those are other organs, our kidneys, ancestral energy, old texts. Like for me, my teachings, I did not make them up. I thank God some people long time ago wrote them, and they're guiding me. And same, I know Tejo is always quoting her teacher. So that's a way to create a stable base for liver energy, gallbladder energy, that is, that upward energy of wanting, but can also be very immature. So it's not bad. We all have it. We all know it. But the more we understand the physical nature of an organ and the emotional nature of an organ and the spiritual nature of an organ, the more we have a map to guide us along the way. Voila, I'm going to stop here now. And if you have any questions, and if I can answer them, I'll be happy to try to do so.
We've got about 6 minutes. I have a question though. You know what Paige was saying last week, she was talking about the equinox as going from dark to light. And then today you were saying it's going from yin to yang, but is it yin light and yang is dark? What is it?
No, yang is actually, that would be another long, but no, yang is more heat and light. Yin is more cold and dark. The night is yin, the day is yang.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So if you observe right now, you can see every spring that energy is awakened, like certainly in France. Wow, it's a liver country. And right now it's demonstrations and, spring, but it's in all countries. Remember the Arab Springs? And you might notice around you that there are more conflicts. Also more, stronger conflicts. So
I think we probably should wind it up.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I feel like I have to watch this again. So let's do the giving back the merit. May the merit of this practice.
May the merit of
this practice
benefit all beings.
Benefit all beings.
And bring peace.
And bring peace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy spring.
Yes, yes. Have a good day.
Thank you.